What she found was a £22 billion black hole this year. Now, she had a choice: pretend it isn't there, walk past it, or deal with it.
Now,
I just want to deal with it.
I just want to stop you there. I just want to stop you there. On that 22 billion, I want everybody watching this to know and understand that nearly half of that 22 billion, £9 billion, comes from decisions that your government has made to give many public sector workers pay rises above inflation, including junior doctors getting 22% of an increase over 2 years. So again, when it comes to winter fuel allowance, that was a choice. It was a political decision for the reasons that you say. You want to sort out the economy. But how can you justify it to viewers who feel like it is an attack on some people who've worked hard all their lives? They're not wealthy. They don't have money to spare. And this year, if it's cold, they're going to be looking at the thermostat and wondering if they can pay their bills.
As pressure mounts on Keir Starmer, one voice stands out among the chorus of critics: Isabel Oakeshott. The prominent political commentator has been consistently vocal in her criticism of Starmer's handling of the UK's most pressing issues, from migration to the economy, questioning whether he is truly capable of leading the country through such turbulent times. Oakeshott has been particularly outspoken about his failure to present a concrete, comprehensive migration strategy as illegal crossings continue to rise, arguing that his reliance on superficial fixes, like arresting a few key figures, does nothing to address the systemic issues fueling the crisis. In her eyes, Starmer's lack of clear direction and decisive leadership is a recipe for disaster.
Wraps up warm tonight because it's getting very cold outside, but thankfully we have a Prime Minister who cares deeply about those who can't afford to put the heating on.
Dewsbury, winter before last, in the height of the energy prices going up, and spoke to an 84-year-old woman, worked all her life, obviously now a pensioner. And she told me that she doesn't get out of bed till midday because she didn't want to turn the heating on.
Yeah, it's awful. And
then when she did get out of bed, she had this sort of thermal jacket that she just wore all day long, so she didn't have to put the heating up very high. That's an awful position to put a pensioner in.
Oh, hang on a minute. Sorry, that was before the election when he was begging for your vote. Sorry, I forgot. Since then, of course, he's taken away the £300 winter fuel payment for all but the poorest of pensioners and condemns millions of OAPs to freeze this winter. Don't take my word for it either. When Labour were accusing the Tories of wanting to do the same thing when they were in government,
Keir Starmer's focus on the UK's economic black hole is drawing sharp criticism, particularly over the treatment of pensioners, as his warnings about financial strain clash with policies that now threaten to leave the most vulnerable out in the cold. Literally, the winter fuel allowance, a lifeline for older citizens struggling to pay rising energy bills, is at risk of being cut, leaving those in their 70s or 80s facing freezing temperatures and skyrocketing heating costs, only to hear that the government is pulling back on crucial support.
To the British people, and the British people, whether they like what I'm about to say or not, were duped by a man who talked a very good fight, said there'll be no income tax, no VAT, no all of that. We all know we're going to be screwed. We all know that anybody with a business or anybody who's made anything is going to be paying more. To me, I would have preferred Keir Starmer to have stood up and said, you know what, despite the fact I've never been out of Islington and I've got a knighthood, I am a traditional socialist. I believe in spreading it across. I would have respected.
Starmer's argument is simple. The UK needs austerity to balance the books. But the problem is that pensioners, many of whom have worked their whole lives, are paying the price for a system that seems to forget who has been supporting it all along. Outrage is growing as people question why the elderly are being forced to sacrifice, while other spending, like migrant housing, remains a priority. The numbers don't lie. While pensioners could see their winter payments slashed, large sums of money are being directed elsewhere, raising doubts about whether Starmer truly understands the struggles of ordinary Britons. As the cost of living rises, cutting back on essential support for the elderly doesn't sit well with many, leaving the question of whether Starmer can continue to justify this or will face even more public backlash.
Suspicious
Keir's migration crisis. It's off the scale. PM admits he must bring down immigration after 906,000 added to the population. It says here, according to the Daily Mail, the PM insisted Britain can no longer be a soft touch after huge revisions to official data showed new net inflows were 906,000 in the year to June 2023. The level for the 12 months to June this year was 728,000 higher than those leaving the country. In itself, that was almost as much as the previous long-term immigration record. You know what I've started to realise with these kinds of things when this happens? The public has been speaking about this probably for the past decade because it just escalates more and more. The government only seem to take action with it when things like a petition that was signed by 2 million...
Keir Starmer's repeated claim that he can stop the boats has raised eyebrows as illegal crossings continue to hit record numbers. Since he became Labour leader, the UK has seen a dramatic rise in small boat arrivals, with thousands risking their lives to cross the English Channel. Despite this surge, Starmer remains steadfast in his belief that his plan will eventually fix the issue. But with the numbers climbing every single month, it's increasingly difficult to see how his promises align with reality.
And with the enforcement action that follows through, and as you know, there was a very significant arrest just the other week in relation to the work that we are doing. That is how you do it. That is serious. That is a government that absolutely is getting to grips with this. Same on legal migration. You invite me to put an arbitrary number on it. For 14 years, we had an arbitrary number under the previous government. They said
Starmer insists that everything is under control, but critics argue that his plan doesn't match the scale of the problem. Instead of a concrete strategy, he talks about safe and legal routes for refugees, an approach some believe could even encourage more people to make the dangerous journey. His continued optimism despite record arrivals is starting to look like wishful thinking. It's one thing to have a policy on paper, but when people are still pouring in, concerns are growing that his leadership is out of touch with reality. This disconnect has fueled rising frustration not just from the public, but also from within his own party, as Labour members begin to question whether Starmer's plan is even remotely realistic. With boat numbers continuing to climb, calls for a real solution are getting louder, as people demand action, not empty promises, leaving the question of how much longer Starmer can keep insisting it's under control when the boats just keep coming.
living standards in every region of the country. Britain rebuilt with 1.5 million new homes, safer streets, more police on the beat, the best start in life for every child, with a record proportion of 5-year-olds starting school ready to learn, clean power by 2030, homegrown British energy, waiting lists in our NHS cut.
Keir Starmer's leadership is increasingly being questioned as the UK faces mounting challenges, from the border crisis to the country's economic struggles, leaving many to ask whether he actually has a clear plan. The answer, it seems, remains unclear, as his policies often lack the detail needed to address Britain's biggest issues, and his repeated promises of change are beginning to feel like empty words while small boat crossings continue to surge and the cost of living spirals out of control. Starmer's silence on concrete solutions is growing louder, fueling voter frustration, with a leader who appears more focused on political rhetoric than real action. This uncertainty has sparked calls for a new election, with many questioning whether he is the right person to lead the country forward. And even within his own party, Labour members are expressing doubts about his ability to steer the ship through such turbulent waters. As public trust wanes, the pressing question looms: will Starmer step up and deliver a plan that works? Or is it time for the UK to seek new leadership? The pressure is on, the clock is ticking, and the need for decisive direction has never been greater.
And what's going on here is you can see the desperation in his face. So he's literally going around every country asking them for commercial favours, and that's now their priority, because domestically...
Keir Starmer's approach to the growing migration crisis has once again raised eyebrows, as his recent celebration of the arrest of a key figure involved in illegal boat crossings has left many shaking their heads. While the arrest might seem like a step forward, the reality is much harsher. One arrest does nothing to solve the deeper issue and only highlights Starmer's failure to grasp the scale of the problem. His focus on individual arrests instead of systemic reform feels like a desperate attempt to appear tough on immigration without addressing the root causes. Arresting one person might grab headlines, but it won't stop the boats. And the truth is that unless the government takes serious action on border control, illegal crossings will only continue to rise.
Stephen Wolfe, the migration expert and former MEP, is our next guest, and he, like me, is open-mouthed to discover that 5,000 migrants have arrived in the United Kingdom on boats since Sir Keir Starmer was PM. Stephen, I'm shocked, aren't you, my friend?
Oh, I just could never believe that anyone would cross the boats whatsoever. Those poor people smugglers were frightened to death when Keir Starmer came over. They weren't preparing en masse, ready to get them over. The only big surprise to me, Jeremy, this week actually has come across with the research that we're doing, that actually the French are beginning to actually try and stop the boats by puncturing more of them.
The public is starting to catch on, as critics argue that Starmer's tactics are more about political theatre than real solutions. How many more arrests will it take before the public demands a comprehensive plan to tackle illegal immigration? Starmer needs more than sound bites. He needs a strategy that addresses the heart of the crisis. As the boats keep coming, the question remains whether his arrests will make any real difference or are just temporary fixes to a problem that requires long-term action. Meanwhile, his handling of the UK housing crisis has sparked outrage, particularly over how government resources are being allocated. Migrants arriving via small boats are being housed in properties originally meant for homeless Britons. And as homelessness continues to rise, the government is placing asylum seekers in taxpayer-funded accommodations while thousands of UK citizens struggle to find shelter.
As we said, was in the Middle East yesterday. He was first in UAE, then he went to Saudi Arabia, then he went to Cyprus, where he was sort of glad-handing with all the people in the armed forces there. Some people were suggesting yesterday he's gone there, hasn't he, to sort of sell off Cyprus and sell off the bases. But apparently he's coming home. He's going to be back later on today in order to appear at Prime Minister's questions. Tom Slater is here from Spiked Online. Tom, it's not been a great week, has it, for old Sir Keir?
This situation has become a flashpoint for critics, who argue that British families, many living on the streets or in temporary housing, are being pushed aside in favour of migrants. The irony is hard to ignore. Homes meant for the most vulnerable in society are being used to house people who have just arrived in the UK. It's no wonder the public is up in arms after all. Isn't it the government's job to prioritise those who have lived in the country for years over those who have only just arrived? The decision to house migrants in these properties has raised serious questions about how much support should go to those arriving illegally versus those already struggling within the system. While some argue that migrants should be treated humanely, many feel the UK government has lost sight of its primary responsibility, caring for its own people first. With public frustration growing, the question remains: is Starmer really putting the needs of the British people first? Or is he letting the housing crisis spiral further out of control?
Is it? And it begs the question why so much of it is lying empty whilst the taxpayer picks up the bill for hundreds of migrants to be in a hotel down the road. Let me spell out what that means. That means the taxpayer is paying twice for accommodation for asylum seekers and refugees, not only in the hotel, but also in a purpose-built village, much of which is lying empty, and those units that are occupied, in some cases they're being occupied by people who are, by the council's own admission, in full-time work, and can afford the kind of cars that, trust me,
As pressure mounts on Keir Starmer, one voice stands out among the chorus of critics: Isabel Oakeshott. The prominent political commentator has been vocal in her criticism of Starmer's handling of the UK's most pressing issues, from migration to the economy, questioning whether he is truly capable of leading the country through such turbulent times. Oakeshott has been particularly outspoken about his failure to present a concrete, comprehensive migration strategy as illegal crossings continue to rise, arguing that his reliance on superficial fixes, like arresting a few key figures, does nothing to address the systemic issues fueling the crisis. In her eyes, Starmer's lack of clear direction and decisive leadership is a recipe for disaster.